for the exhaust sound. There's the ESC, which you can change as well. I mean, you can customize it until your heart is content. I mean, unlike the i30N, where you've got the adaptive dampers, it's a passive setup in here, but that's all you need in something this size. And what I like about this especially is it doesn't feel like it's been made by a committee to take advantage of the rapidly increasing in popularity N name. It feels like they've decided that they're going to make the i20 as fun as they possibly can, and this is the result. And they've done a really excellent job. It might not be as powerful or as expensive as some of the cars on this test, but you can still have fun in this. Maybe if the track isn't the best place for it, but it holds its own. These hot hatches could not be any more different to the supercars and the Ferrari, yet they still offer their own brand of driving thrills. However, what if you want even more power and performance, yet don't want to sacrifice things like everyday usability and 4 seats? Well, here's your answer.
Right, so BMW M4, I've really been looking forward to driving this actually. Weirdly, I've not had that much experience driving these kind of cars on track, but from what I can sort of already feel and understand, it seems to be a bit of a powerhouse. So yeah, really looking forward to driving this. You know, first impressions, I like the interior. It's pretty easy to access everything. I'm pretty happy with trying to get the traction control, everything off. There's a lot of modes, a lot of things, different settings you can change, which I'm sure I'm going to like, the fact that I can change all these things, but at the moment I'm a little bit confused as to what I want to be using. But yeah, at the moment it's pretty straightforward, the modes I'm in. It already feels pretty quick. It's definitely got, you know, a good grunt to it. Downshifts, quite nice. I've driven sort of more powerful cars and it's a bit tame on the downshifts, but still sounds nice enough. I mean, it really does put the power down. A lot of energy is going through the rear wheels, which I just don't know how well it's responding to it. It just feels like you're constantly just waiting for the rear to grip. The conditions are a little bit tricky today, but I think I just feel like I'm waiting for the rear to grip constantly. And yeah, I mean, you can definitely have a bit of fun with it. The downshifts are a little bit delayed. Can't quite get them quite as quick as you would like. The front is actually very responsive. That's quite surprising. The brakes as well, almost stronger than the gearbox. Yeah, it just comes to a stop straight away, which is a little bit much. If you're soft on the pedal, it's a little bit aggressive on the brakes, a bit grabby. There you go, get a bit sideways. It's so loose on the rear. There's a lot of power, and it's just heavy. It just feels like as soon as the rear starts to go, it's like a pendulum. It just wants to keep going, and I think the chassis is trying to like counteract it by trying to straighten you up, but the weight of the car just wants to keep going. So it feels like you've kind of got two forces acting against each other, which, I mean, I don't know if I like that, but it's definitely a lot of fun to be driving. So yeah, great fun car, a lot of power, yeah, great fun to drive, but almost a little bit too much power going through the rear wheels for the car to cope with, and it does feel heavy, just even on the brakes. You know, the brakes are already pretty sharp, so then you throw in a big heavy load into that, and it's, yeah, it's trying to stop pretty quick. Yeah, the front is so responsive. Really surprising how much front grip it's got. The tyres, everything just works really nicely with the front. It's just the rear, it's just pretty lively. So yeah, I mean, all in all, a great car. It's got a lot of power for what it is, but just feels balance-wise, the front's really nice, but just feels like the rear doesn't deliver the power quite as nicely as even the higher power cars I've driven earlier today. So yeah, especially in slightly greasy conditions like this, it just feels like you're constantly waiting for the rear to grip, and that can be fun, but also a little bit unnerving sometimes.
Now, it's worth mentioning that after filming this on a damp track and Cup 2 tyres, Jamie then drove the M4 on a dry track with the same tyres and was far more impressed with the levels of traction and handling predictability. Nonetheless, its main rival in this test is the Alfa Romeo, even if this particular GT-AM model doesn't actually have 4 seats. It's not very often that Alfa Romeo comes up with a limited edition performance car, so when they do, you have to savour it while you can. And while the M4 is more of a jack of all trades, this is a more focused machine because it's about 100 kilograms lighter than the regular Giulia Quadrifoglio. It's got those special Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tyres. It's got a wider front and rear track. It's also got a bit more power as well, 30 brake horsepower more, which isn't actually that much, but it does have an appreciable extra amount of oomph when you're coming through, or coming out of a corner rather. I think one thing to note is that the gearbox, and Jamie was saying this, and I've just come out and I see exactly what she means, is that second gear coming through these corners, these tighter corners at Anglesey, it feels a bit too short, but then if you go into third, it feels a little bit too long, so there's not quite the balance that you want in these slower corners. And while I've done a decent job to reduce the body roll, which you get from the regular QV, it's still there. And actually, I'm not sure how much more controlled it feels than the M4. Saying that, it sounds a hell of a lot better than the BMW. I mean, it's not a bad sounding car, but this is just a step up. It really does bark, and from the inside, actually, you don't get the full effect of it, which is kind of the opposite of the BMW. You can properly hear this thing from the outside. Coming into the braking zones, you've got a fair amount of pedal travel before it actually firms up. The brakes are very good once it does firm up. I could just do with a slightly longer second and a slightly shorter third. I think it's the initial turn-in with this car, which is the biggest difference to the regular QV. It just turns in with a lot sharper attitude, and it gets itself up on its haunches and feels like it's leaning in more through the corner and just hanging on with those outside wheels. Of all the cars we brought with us here today on this track, which is now pretty much dry, I think this is actually the most tail happy. It's all that torque, and again that second gear, which is just perhaps a little bit too short, meaning that you just need to give it the slightest bit of throttle and it sends the rear out very, very easily indeed, which is great fun. But actually for outright traction on a dry track, I reckon the BMW has actually got this beat. I mean, if you liked the regular Giulia Quadrifoglio, then you're going to love this as a performance car because it just turns things up a notch. But when it comes to it being an all-rounder, compared with the regular QV, and also on this test compared with the M4, you kind of have to ask what you're getting in addition. And that was that. 2021's finest performance cars put through their paces at one of the UK's best circuits, and then off camera on some of the UK's best driving roads. In truth, every car had its merits. The Huracan STO sounded like thunder and drove like its Super Trofeo racing car equivalent. The Ferrari is a technological masterpiece that takes your breath away every time you drive it. The Alfa GT-AM builds on the already outstanding Quadrifoglio, the M4 is a brilliant all-rounder, and the two hot hatches reminded us that your pockets needn't be that deep to own a proper performance car. But at the end of the day, we always ask the same question. If you had one last drive in one more car, money, no object, which would it be? And the answer, for us, is the Porsche 911 GT3. It is one of the most spectacular road cars ever produced, and one that somehow combines the best of Porsche old and new into one utterly spellbinding machine. It is without question, our 2021 Sports Car Giant Test champion.